Am I qualified to study the Gita? If you are already a knower of the Absolute, like the great sage Shuka, who had no personal identity, if you are always in a state of absolute merger with the Supreme, there is no need for you to learn the Gita. On the other hand, if your mind is full of external pursuits, if you are always tormented by unquenchable passions and have no love for truth, you need not bother to study the Gita. Wait until you become disillusioned and badly want to know who you are. If, however, you do not come under either of these categories, you must be thirsting for truth. If you love truth and want to seek it, there is nothing like the Gita to guide you. If you are convinced that there is something beyond the world of the senses, and if you have a thirst for such a joy that is not limited to the perishable, the Gita can surely help you to find it in your own self. Okay, so what is the subject matter of the Gita? In one word, we can describe it as Brahma Vidya, the science of the absolute. But absolute, by that we mean here the supreme knowledge, which is self-founded, self with a capital S, the self, the Atman, the Brahma, not the individuated self, but the universal self, perhaps the universal mind. Not sure. And by which alone everything exists and everything is known. So how can that be? How can everything exist alone by that self? Until you realize this truth, you know only relative factors. One who feels the pangs of life and does not know how to get out of them is called a Vishadi. Vishada means the sadness generated by conflict. Conflict arises out of paradoxical situations, and life bristles with paradoxes. The enigmas and paradoxes of life can be resolved only by knowing the Absolute. The Bhagavad Gita, in a very comprehensive manner, deals with the riddles of life. In the first chapter is presented a typical seeker confronted by a grave enigma which he cannot get over by mere ratiocination, a carping seeker questioning everything in a state of agony is called a purvaksin, an anterior skeptic. The whole of the first chapter and the first 9 verses of the second chapter consist of the presentation of the anterior skeptic Arjuna. The second chapter explains the stand of the wisdom seeker Krishna, in contrast to the notions of a skeptic who is in conflict. The wise one always sees the omnipresence of the Absolute as the true foundation of everything, and as the indwelling spirit in everyone. Knowing the Absolute as one's own imperishable self is described in the second chapter as Samkhya Yoga. A man who is afflicted by world consciousness, even after realizing that he is none other than the Absolute, will find it hard to keep away from the necessary demands of his biological and psychological urges. It is these urges that necessitate action. Hence, it is necessary to discuss the implications of action in the context of wisdom. The third chapter therefore describes how action can be unitively treated so that it will not bind the agent to the consequent result. Wait, what do you mean by unitive action? That will be explained later. Brute action is to be differentiated from action guided by wisdom. Comprehensive knowledge and unitive action are counterparts of a situation. Each has its own discipline and is to be understood separately. The secret of being wise and also acting accordingly is taught in the fourth chapter, called Jnana Yoga. Jnana Yoga. The fifth chapter is Karma Samyasa Yoga. In that chapter, it is shown how the necessary aspects of life can be unitively treated. Finding peace in one's own self and sharing it with others is made the chief goal of life. In following the dictates of the Absolute in every situation is treated as most natural to the realized person. The sixth chapter is called Dhyana Yoga. This chapter describes yoga more as a discipline than a philosophical vision. It is described as a sadhana, which means discipline undergone to achieve a specific attainment, and not as a darshana, which means a truth to be visualized. In this chapter, it is taught how the self is raised by the higher self. That's self with a capital S. And how the lower self can be fully established in the higher self with a capital S. The self finding its natural response in the self with the capital S, is described as a true state of yoga. Okay. Wait a minute, but what do you mean by higher self? Self with a capital S. It is the same as God. So the 7th chapter is Jnana Vijnana Yoga. It is in it. All values are categorized in terms of the physical. Adi Bhautika, the divine. Adi Daivika, the sacrificial. No. In terms, let me reread this. In it, that is in the 7th chapter, titled Jnana Vijnana Yoga. In it, all values are categorized in terms of 3 components. The physical, Adi Bhautika, the divine, Adi Daivika, and the sacrificial, Adi Yajnika. These are graded and arranged in such a manner that one value complements the other. This chapter also teaches how the self can be related to the non-self without conflict. The 8th chapter, Akshara Brahma Yoga, to contemplate the benign qualities of the Supreme Lord of one's own self, is the highest form of devotion. Devotion verticalizes the mind, and action horizontalizes it. To fight an enemy with valor and strategic tact is undoubtedly a horizontal attitude of the mind. In spite of the conflicting nature of these 2 attitudes, fighting and contemplation, Arjuna is taught in this chapter how he can contemplate the Lord as his own self with a capital S, and also fight, the dialectical secret by which one can cancel out pairs of opposites, is presented in this chapter. The 9th chapter is called Raja Vidya Raja Guya Yoga. Guya means secret. Does this chapter deal with anything esoteric or occult? Is it open to all? There is nothing esoteric about it. No discipline can be termed scientific Shastra unless it is open and universal, both in its scope and application. The Gita presents a science of the absolute. It does not withhold from anyone any secret whatsoever. Okay. But you said that Guya means secret, right? Then there must be something secret about it. In what sense is that chapter 9, called Raja Vidya, Raja Guya Yoga, in what sense is it secret? Well, Einstein's theory of relativity can remain a secret to those who do not know higher mathematics and advanced physics. As in the study of physics, there is a methodical way in which the Gita works out its lessons. Each chapter leads to the next. And when we come to its conclusive teaching in the 9th chapter, to be able to grasp the full implications of the secrets of the Gita, the student should be disciplined in this special methodology, the dialectical way of reasoning, Yoga Mimamsa. Wow. This type of reasoning we commonly employ is linear when we argue from a general principle to a specific conclusion or inductively hypothesize a general notion. A reason conforms to the pattern of linear thinking. On the other hand, when we cognize the polarization of counterparts that belong to a dialectical situation and arrive at a unitive or integrated notion, canceling out the elements of contradiction in the opposing pairs, we are employing dialectical reasoning. In this chapter, our mind is lifted to the loftiest heights of sublimity. And hence, this is called the chapter of the Supreme Secret. This chapter is introductory to the 10th, which narrates the cosmic structure of the universe. In terms of divine values, does each chapter deal with a separate topic? Has the Gita any inner coordination? Well, truth is many-faceted, and innumerable are the possible angles of vision. Each angle permits us only a relative vision. However, each vision has its own structural secrets and functional participation with the whole. Hence, it is necessary to have a separate chapter to provide each comprehensive vision with a suitable frame of reference consistent with an overall scheme or correlation. The 18 chapters of the Gita are not disjunctly designed. Each chapter is structurally related to its adjacent chapters and is intended to be complementary to them. The 18 chapters are arranged as spokes on the hub of Brahma Vidya. The science of the absolute, Brahma Vidya. Brahma Vidya, the science of the absolute. The method employed in each chapter has in common with the rest the goal of the realization of the self with the capital S through yoga. Further, we see that the conclusive teaching given at the close of the 9th chapter is again repeated in the closing chapter. This again shows that the Gita has a consistent teaching which can undoubtedly be described as one-pointed devotion, ekantika bhakti. Ekantika bhakti. instead of giving the conclusive teaching only in the last chapter, why is it given in the 9th as well as the 18th? So the author in the Gita has in his mind a structural design of his work. Okay. He uses the first half of the book to discuss fundamentals and pure principles. The second half is for applied philosophy. It is in this second half that he gives the diagnostic and symptomatic analysis of personality, which one can apply to oneself to discern one's Svadharma. That is spelled S, V as in Victor, A, D as in dog, H, A, R, M, A. Svadharma. So that's a Sanskrit term for the characteristic foundation of individual personality. Both the pure teaching of the first half and the applied teaching of the second half lead to the same teaching that one should live always in the adoration of the Absolute, feeling one's identity with the Absolute in thought, word, and deed. We now go on to the second half of the book. So, our true being is the self with a capital S, Atman. So, Atman is described as Sat Chit Ananda. Sat Chit Ananda. Sat means existence, Chit is subsistence, Ananda is the value factor. Sat, existence, Chit, subsistence, Ananda, value factor. Sat, existence, Chit, subsistence, Ananda, value factor. Actual presences or value factors belong to the universe are described in this chapter as aspects of the Absolute with which we can relate ourselves. The difference between the values presented in the previous chapter and this one is negligible. Comparatively, the values given in the 9th chapter are more conceptual. This justifies the title, Unitive Recognition of Positive Values, Vibhuti Yoga, for the 10th chapter. So, why is Ananda translated as value? Yes, isn't Ananda sort of like joy, bliss? And isn't Sat Chit Ananda. Isn't that translated as truth, consciousness, and bliss? Something like that. So why is Ananda translated as value instead of joy or bliss? Something like that. If Atman is the same as the Absolute, all experiences should come within its scope. Pain, suffering, disease, poverty, and death are not at all blissful or enjoyable. Is not the Ananda the opposite of misery? Isn't it? Isn't it so? Well, we can catalog a long list of evil items, but we cannot assign the cause of these to an agency outside the pale of the Absolute. That is why we don't want to translate Ananda as bliss. The term we use here is value. Items of pleasure can be arranged in terms of qualitative or quantitative units of values of an ascending or descending order. We're counting positive values when we go from indifference to the highest state of bliss. We descend in the value scale when we go from highest bliss to 0 point. If we go any further from the 0 point, we will advance in the opposite direction, which should be counted as negative values. Thus, pain and pleasure, irrespective of their accompanying modes of affectivity, come under the scale values positive or negative. So earlier you said that from the 10th chapter onward, we come to the sorry, let's see if I can keep it from shaking. Okay. Earlier you said that from the 10th chapter onward, we come to the application of the teachings given in the first 9 chapters. The 10th chapter also appears to be theoretical rather than being applied. In the 10th chapter, we only just entered the second half of the book. Here, Krishna has to prepare the mind of Arjuna to receive an experience which is very unusual and difficult to comprehend in its entirety, or to appreciate without sufficient instruction. Thus, the 10th chapter actually marks the beginning of applied yoga in the science of absolute. In the science of the absolute. Brahma Vidya. So now, how does Arjuna experience the cosmic structure of values? So the 11th chapter is the unitive vision of the Absolute. In Sanskrit, this is called Visvarupa Darshana Yoga. Visvarupa Darshana Yoga. We get empirical certitude by direct perception. The absolute and spiritual values cannot be directly perceived, but they can be intuitively visualized. Spiritual vision is direct. Spiritual vision also is direct. While direct perception in Sanskrit is called pratyaksha, seen by the eye, spiritual vision is called aparoksha, not perceived by another. Arjuna gets a direct vision of the Absolute with the aid of an inner eye of spiritual vision with which he was blessed by his Guru, Sri Krishna. The mere description of the Absolute gives only a theoretical understanding and intellectual appreciation. It should be followed by one's own direct experience. This chapter is devoted to the description of Arjuna's direct experience. The 12th chapter, Bhakti Yoga. We may translate it as unitive devotion and contemplation. The term bhakti is used here in a very specific sense. It is not just an emotional attachment or an enchantment that one feels towards the divine. Bhakti in Vedanta means continuous contemplation. Continuous contemplation of one's own true nature as the Absolute. A true model of bhakti, devotion, and of a bhakta, devotee, is given in this chapter. And now the 13th chapter. That's called Kshetra Kshetranya Vibhaga Yoga. Kshetra means the field, Kshetrajna, the knower of the field. So in Bhakti Yoga, we learn that it is the divine that dwells in every being. This chapter enables us to differentiate the self from the non-self. It is translated as the unitive understanding of the distinction between the actual and the perceptual. Okay, so does everyone experience devotion in the same way? Peter differs from Paul. The 14th chapter deals with personality variations based on guna. It is entitled Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga. Guna means a quality. In the present context, the difference is to nature modality. Hence, this chapter is called the unitive way of transcending the three nature modalities. All of us and everything in nature are evolutes of the three modalities of nature. The 15th chapter is called Purushottama Yoga. In the Samkhyan philosophy, there are two primary factors called Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha is the equivalent to the Supreme Being, to the Supreme Spirit, and Prakriti is primordial matter from which nature is supposed to have evolved. The duality of Purusha and Prakriti, spirit and matter, is transcended by conceiving the Supreme Spirit as the highest reality. The Gita names Purusottama. Purusottama? Names it Purusottama. Purusottama. The title of this chapter is translated as the unitive approach to the paramount person. The 16th chapter is called Daiva Asura Sampad Vibhaga Yoga. The three gunas mentioned in the previous chapter are said to create all conditioning impressions which are responsible for building up one's character. Once they are formed, they persist even through several lives. In the present chapter, reference is made to two main tendencies which run vertically through one's life, giving a contiguous character to one's habitual voice. The higher nature is called Daivi Sampati. The lower nature is called Asuri Sampati. Daiva means divine. Asura means demonic. Daiva Sampati therefore means tendencies which are spiritually rich. The opposite is Asuri. To assess the value structure of your personality, you should discern these two tendencies clearly and should see how far your thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors are influenced by each. So, let's stop there. We'll look at the 17th and 18th chapter, like an overview and outline of each chapter. So we got the first 16, I guess. And the introduction to the Bhagavad Gita is fairly long, 14 pages. We've gotten through about 8 pages, so we're almost done. That's the Bhagavad Gita by Nitya Chaitanya Yati, with translator Nataraja Guru, commentator Nitya Chaitanya Yati. I think he was born in 1924. It said here. Hmm, 1924, but he's passed away. Otherwise, he would be 100 years old. I'm not sure when he passed away. I could look it up, or you could look it up. You'd look it up. Published by DK Print World. This is the 1993 edition, but sometime in the near future, hope to get the new edition. This book, indisputably one of the world's best-known books, the Bhagavad Gita, embodies the quintessence of classical Upanishadic philosophy, presented in the form of a dialogue between Krishna, the archetypal teacher, and Arjuna, the archetypal human being, caught in the grip of a monumental crisis. For anyone like Arjuna has ever paused to ponder the meaning of life, the work is as relevant today as it was when it was written. by stripping away the manifold biases, both subtle and obvious, that have colored other commentaries. Guru Nitya has uncovered the perennial philosophy at the heart of this great classic. In an original, easy to understand format, his commentary divides each of the Gita's 18 chapters into 3 sections. The first, elucidating the basic concepts involved. The second, including Sanskrit texts in Roman script, along with English meaning of each word or phrase. And the third is Nataraja Guru's lucid and a revolutionary English translation. Oh no, that's still the second. So the second includes the Sanskrit text in Roman script. In other words, we can read it. We don't need to learn Devanagari script. So we can read it and pronounce it phonetically, the Sanskrit. And then the English meaning of each word for word breakdown. And then Nataraja Guru's lucid and revolutionary English translation. And then the third is the explanatory notes and comments in the form of yet another dialogue between a teacher and a student. So there's Krishna as the teacher and Arjuna as the student, and then there is a generic teacher and a generic student, where the student poses questions and the teacher gives thoughtful answers. So the breakthrough of this interpretation of the Gita is in its transcendence of sectarian dogma to reveal the work as a fully developed scientific psychology whose keen insights and vivid reasoning can be readily appreciated by 21st century minds. Let's see if that's true. Oh, that's another one. So let's look at learn who the commentator is. He's a well-known poet, philosopher, mystic, psychologist, and author. And he was one of the leading exponents of Advaita Vedanta and other systems of traditional Indian philosophy. He made his preliminary studies of India's spirituality and culture by traveling for 8 years as a sannyasin mendicant student. He sat at the feet of the best teachers in Kashi, Haridwar, Panchavadi, the Himalayan schools, and thereafter completed formal studies at several universities. While specializing in India's inheritance of wisdom, he is fully versed in modern academic thinking as well, with special emphasis on the fields of psychology, sociology, biology, and psychochemistry. Guru Nitya is in the spiritual hierarchy of Narayana Guru and is the direct disciple of Nataraja Guru. Together, these three have brought a modern scientific viewpoint to India's treasury of wisdom. Wow. So here's Nitya's direct guru, Nataraja Guru. He translated this Gita And he was the direct disciple of the great philosopher poet Yogi Narayana Guru. But he also studied under Henri Bergson at the Sorbonne, where he took his doctorate in educational psychology. His scheme of correlation between science and mysticism amounts to an epochal advance in philosophy. And his translation of the Bhagavad Gita is accompanied by a brilliant commentary which Guru Nitya acknowledges to have used freely. So there you have it. Bhagavad Gita. We just started in the introduction. Can't wait. And you probably can't wait either to get to the meat of the subject.